Who let the help in through the front door? He said it loud enough for the bartender to hear, loud enough for the woman in the red gown beside him to pause her champagne mid-sip, loud enough for the words to land exactly where he wanted them to land. Mireille Okafor did not turn around. She stood at the entrance of the Hartwell Grand Ballroom, her invitation in one hand, her coat still on her arm, and she let the sentence pass over her, the way wind passes over stone. She had driven 40 minutes in November rain to get here. She had ironed her dress twice. She was not going to turn around. The Hartwell Innovation Gala was, by any reasonable measure, a monument to itself. $1,100 a plate, a ceiling fitted with floating LED panels that mimicked a live satellite feed of the city below. 3 venture capitalists from Sand Hill Road, 2 sitting senators, a former Secretary of Commerce, and 1 sitting federal judge, all standing near a custom whiskey bar that cost more than most people's cars. The theme, printed across the program in brushed silver, read, "Investing in Tomorrow's Founders." The irony would take about 90 minutes to become visible. At the center of the room moved the Caldwells. Senator Philip Caldwell, 63, square jaw, UVA law, had the handshake of a man who had been photographed shaking hands since he was 11 years old. His wife, Renée Caldwell, 58, wore a column of ivory silk and the particular smile of a woman who had spent 3 decades learning exactly how much a smile was worth in a room like this. Their son, Brixton Caldwell, 31, stood near the stage with a gin and tonic and the specific posture of someone who had been told since birth that posture was a form of power. His fiancée, Tatiana Rowe, photographed beside him for the program insert, had her ring hand angled toward the photographer at all times. This was the family the city of Austin knew. The Family Texas Monthly had put on the cover twice. The dynasty that had, according to every press release issued in the past decade, built the Caldwell Foundation from Philip's Senate office dining table in 2009 into a $200 million institution supporting Texas entrepreneurs. That was the version they had told so many times it had become geology. 12 miles east, that morning, a different version of the day had started. Mireille Okafor, 29, had been awake since 4:45. She had read 3 quarterly reports before the coffee finished brewing. She ran Okafor Capital out of a co-working space in East Austin, whose sign had been broken since February and which she had never gotten around to fixing. Because the sign was not the part of the building that mattered to her. Her staff was 4 people. Her portfolio was 43 companies. Her net worth, which she had declined to discuss with Forbes, Bloomberg, or anyone holding a microphone, sat at 9 figures. She had received the Caldwell Foundation Gala invitation 6 weeks ago. She had set it on her kitchen counter and looked at it for a long time. In 2019, the Caldwell Foundation had been 8 days from dissolution. A combination of overextended commitments, a mismanaged endowment, and 2 board members who had quietly moved on had left the organization technically insolvent. Philip Caldwell had called her himself. She had been 24 years old. He had spoken to her for 11 minutes before asking whether she had the capital to bridge the gap. She had. She wrote the check for $63 million on a Tuesday. In exchange, she had taken a 30% stake in the foundation's primary operating entity, plus a single-page covenant. The covenant gave her and her co-investors the right to withdraw all capital and dissolve the operating agreement if any Caldwell officer engaged in conduct that materially misrepresented the foundation's origins or its funding sources in a public forum. For 5 years, she had been quiet. Philip had asked her to be. She had agreed, because the foundation was doing real work, and the work mattered more than the credit. Last month, the foundation had announced a keynote partnership with a documentary production company. The documentary was called Built from Nothing. The trailer had run during a Senate subcommittee hearing livestream. Philip Caldwell, on camera, had described building the foundation with, quote, "nothing but conviction and a folding table." Mireille had watched the trailer twice. She had called her attorney, Desmond Park, that afternoon. Tonight she was going as a guest, not as a stakeholder, not as the woman whose name was on the covenant. She wanted to see who they were when they thought she was nobody. She clipped her grandmother's gold earrings in at the bathroom mirror. She put on the dark green dress she had bought on sale 2 years ago and had never found the occasion to wear. She picked up her bag. Inside it was a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a single document, the covenant, freshly notarized, with the relevant clause highlighted in yellow. She drove herself, the valet at the Hartwell, a college junior named Marcus, who would remember this night for the rest of his life, opened her car door, glanced at her dress, glanced at her face, and said with complete sincerity, "Welcome, ma'am. Have a great evening." She thanked him by name. He had a name tag. She had always believed in reading name tags. She walked through the glass doors of the Hartwell Grand. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the looking started. It was the same thing it always was. A calculation running behind the eyes of people who had been taught to calculate rooms. Black woman, natural hair, green dress, no jewelry except the earrings. Hartwell Grand Ballroom. Caldwell Gala. Wrong equation. A server named Donna, who had been working galas for 19 years, and who had learned to read rooms the way pilots read weather, noticed the shift. She took 3 steps toward Mireille with a champagne flute. "Can I help you find your table, ma'am? Or are you with the catering company?" Mireille smiled the way you smile at a question that is not really a question. "I'm a guest tonight, thank you." She showed the invitation. Donna looked at it. She flushed deeply and retreated toward the kitchen. 20 feet away, Tatiana Rowe had been watching. Tatiana had very good peripheral vision and the social instincts of someone who had been auditioning for rooms like this since her debutante year. She set her champagne on the tray of a passing server and walked over in the particular diagonal of a woman who had decided she was doing someone a favor. "Hi, sweetie." The word sweetie had a job to do, and it did it immediately. "I think you may have the wrong event. The Austin Black Chamber Mixer is at the Marriott on 6th. I'm sure they'd love to have you over there." Mireille did not move. "I have an invitation." Tatiana's smile was the kind that had been professionally coached and still showed the coaching. "I'm sure you do. They're very easy to copy. We've had issues before. Why don't you let me get someone from the door to help you find your way out before it becomes a whole thing?" She reached out and took Mireille's elbow. Not a touch, a grip. She turned Mireille a quarter step toward the lobby, the way you redirect a shopping cart. Mireille did not pull her arm back. She simply reached into her bag with her free hand and lifted out the sealed envelope. Tatiana looked at it. Her smile tightened by 3 degrees. "What is that, Elise?" "Not exactly. Whatever it is," Tatiana said, "it doesn't belong here, and neither do you. Now, be smart. Walk out the way you came in." A crowd had begun to form. Not a crowd the way people crowd around an accident. A crowd the way people crowd around something they have collectively decided is entertainment. A tech founder from Dallas. A lobbyist in a charcoal suit. A woman from the Texas Monthly Table whose job was literally to write things down, and who had already opened her notes app. Then Renée Caldwell arrived. Renée moved through the parting room the way water moves, through a landscape it has shaped over decades. Her ivory silk did not wrinkle. Her smile arrived before she did. "Tatiana, darling, what are we doing?" She says. "She has an invitation, Renée. Does she?" Renée extended one hand, palm up, 4 fingers curled. The gesture of a woman who has never in her life been told her hands were not the final authority. Mireille placed the invitation in her palm. Renée lifted it toward the nearest light panel. She turned it. She examined it with the concentrated attention of someone who wanted the room to see her examining it. The room went quieter. The string quartet kept playing, but the conversations near the entrance had stopped. Renée's voice was pleasant the way January is pleasant in the Texas Hill Country, technically above freezing. "This is a very nice forgery, sweetheart. Very nice. But we've been doing this event for 15 years and I know every name on that list." She tore it. The sound was a clean, declarative rip, the kind that lands in a quiet room, like a word nobody expected. She handed both halves back, placed them, actually, against Mireille's chest, so that Mireille had to choose between catching them and letting them fall. She caught them. One half fluttered to the floor anyway. "Now," Renée said, "I want you to turn around, walk back through those doors, and find whatever event you were actually invited to. Because I promise you, sweetheart, this one is not it." Then she lifted her champagne. She turned her wrist in the small, rehearsed arc of a woman who had been photographed at 100 of these events. The white wine rose and fell in a pale arc and soaked into the front of Mireille's green dress. The silk went dark across her chest and her shoulder. The wine dripped off the hem. Renée's voice carried to the bar. "Oh, look at that. Now you really look like you work here. Be a good girl and go find a mop, or better yet, find the exit before I find it for you." Someone at the bar laughed first, then a second person. Then the sound spread in the way sounds spread in rooms where people feel safe laughing. The Texas Monthly reporter had stopped typing notes. She was recording audio. Renée Caldwell had been watching from the stage steps. He pulled out his phone, not to call anyone, to record. He walked toward the cluster of bodies, holding the phone at chest height, lens forward. He was tall enough that it cleared the heads of the people around him. "Hey, y'all," he said, to no one and everyone, grinning at the screen. "I just want everyone to see this. A little gatecrasher situation at our gala. Somebody's very lost tonight." He panned from Mireille's face to Renée's smile, to the wet silk. The chat was already running. "Look at this. She's still here. She's actually still standing here. I don't know whether to call building services or just open a door and let her find the parking garage." He read one comment aloud, then another. The viewer count climbed. Across the room, at the far end of the bar, a man named Wallace Greer stood very still. Wallace Greer, 54, was the foundation's executive director. He had held the role since 2018. He was the only person inside the Caldwell Foundation who had been present in 2019 when Mireille Okafor had walked into the conference room. On the fourth floor of this same building, with a leather portfolio and $63 million, and an absolute absence of fanfare. He had been the one who had called her. He had prepared the due diligence files. He had notarized 2 of the 4 covenant pages himself. He had eaten at the Caldwell's Thanksgiving table for 3 years running since. He saw her from across the room, and the bourbon in his hand went completely still. He thought about walking toward her. He thought about it for 11 seconds, which he would later count, precisely because shame has a way of making time very exact. Then, Senator Caldwell's chief of staff stepped in front of him and said something about the Q2 report. And Wallace answered, and did not walk toward her. The phone lights started going up from tables. Someone at table 9, someone at table 14, someone near the dessert display. 8, then 12 white circles, landing on Mireille's face and the wet green silk. She blinked once, slow. She turned to face all of them. Tatiana, Renée, Brixton and his phone, the room. Her voice when she spoke was not raised. "You're going to want to remember this moment." Tatiana laughed. "Or what, are you going to leave a Yelp review?" Brixton panned the camera back to his own face, then swept it across the room. 40,000 viewers. 52. Senator Philip Caldwell noticed, from the dais, that his ballroom was not fully looking at him. He set down his water glass. He walked to the podium and tapped the microphone once with his ring. The string quartet trailed off. 400 people turned toward the stage. Philip's voice rolled out of the Hartwell's audio system with the specific confidence of a man who had been a senator for 16 years. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption to our evening. It appears we have an uninvited visitor in the room." He said it warmly, the way you say something at a dinner party that you want to land as a joke and no will. "Our team will take care of it, and we'll get right back to celebrating everything we've built together." The room responded the way rooms respond when the most powerful person in the room has just made the joke. With laughter, with applause, with the particular comfort of collective agreement. the foundation's head of event. Security, a man named Oliver, who had worked with Caldwell events for 8 years, crossed the room and took Mireille by the arm. Not hard, not rough, but with the practiced firmness of someone executing an instruction. He walked her toward the lobby doors. 2 staff members fell in beside them. They walked her past the press wall. They walked her through the lobby. They walked her through the front doors and onto the Hartwell's covered entrance, where the November air was cold and damp and smelled of cedar. A photographer from the Austin Chronicle had been waiting outside for a city council member to arrive. He got something else. A black woman in a wine-soaked green dress being walked out of the foundation's gala. He pressed the shutter anyway, because photographers press the shutter first and understand what they've captured second. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called. Mireille did not answer. She stood on the covered curb with the cold coming in off the air, and the Hartwell's exterior lights cutting across the wet pavement. Her grandmother's gold earrings were still on. Her grandmother had worn them to every room anyone had ever tried to keep her out of. Mireille had not lost them. Her bag was still over her shoulder. The sealed envelope was inside it. A silver sedan pulled up to the curb. Her colleague Adese Tremblay was driving. She had called ahead. She got out without a word and looked at the dress and looked at Mireille's face. I'm fine. Open the trunk." Adese opened the trunk. Mireille reached in and removed a slim black portfolio. She did not get into the car. "Adese, call Des. Tell him now." She turned and walked back through the Hartwell's front doors. Desmond Park, 38, had been Mireille's attorney for 6 years. He was in a car on the I-35 when the call came in. He had been waiting for it for 5 years. He had written the covenant clause himself on a Thursday night in November 2019, with Mireille sitting across from him at his dining room table eating cold Thai food while he typed. He had kept every copy. The original was in a fireproof lockbox behind the built-in bookcase in his home office. He had checked that it was still there that morning, out of habit, the way you check that your keys are in your pocket before a long drive. He told his driver to turn around. His 2 associates, already briefed, were already in their coats. Inside the Hartwell, the string quartet had been waved back into the program. Philip Caldwell was at the podium, mid-story, about the foundation's first grant recipient, leaning into the microphone with the ease of a man who had never once in his life wondered whether the room was listening. The room was listening. And then it wasn't. Mireille Okafor walked back through the doors of the Hartwell Grand Ballroom at 9:51 in the evening. Desmond was to her right in a charcoal suit with a black file case under one arm. His first associate and a paralegal flanked him. Wallace Greer, who had met them in the lobby, was pale the color of paper and walking slightly behind with his own folder pressed against his chest. Oliver, the security director, stepped in front of them at the inner threshold. He held up one palm. Desmond did not slow down. He reached into his jacket with his free hand and pressed a single page into Oliver's palm as he passed. Oliver read for 3 seconds. Then he read it again. Then he looked up at Mireille. "Ma'am," he said, "I am deeply sorry." He stepped aside. The double doors opened. The same doors Mireille had been walked out of 19 minutes earlier. The string quartet heard the doors and kept playing. Then they didn't. The stillness spread from the entrance outward table by table, the way a power outage moves through a city block. A woman at table 6 dropped her fork. The sound of it was the first sound anyone made. Philip Caldwell heard it from the dais. His sentence stopped with the word future still in his mouth. Renée saw the procession third. Her champagne flute hovered in midair. The ivory silk of her dress didn't move. Her smile slipped 4 degrees and did not come back. Tatiana saw them fourth. She said something under her breath that the Texas Monthly reporter, standing 7 feet away, caught on her phone's audio. Brixton was last. His phone was still live. 114,000 viewers. He swung the camera toward the entrance, and his chat went quiet for the first time all night. Then it exploded. Desmond walked the length of the ballroom carpet without varying his pace. He climbed the 4 steps of the dais. He extended his hand. Philip Caldwell, operating on 16 years of being deferred to, handed him the microphone by reflex. Desmond tapped it once. The same small thunk Philip had used to quiet the room 40 minutes before. "Good evening." His voice was the particular kind of calm that comes from having already won and knowing the exact moment you chose to show it. "My name is Desmond Park, managing partner at Park Okafor Legal. I'm here on behalf of my client, the primary capital investor in the Caldwell Foundation's operating entity, Miss Mireille Okafor." The silence that followed was not confusion. It was 400 wealthy people doing math very fast and not liking the answer. Wallace Greer stepped up beside Desmond and took the second microphone, the one still sitting in its stand from the auction earlier. His voice cracked on the first word and did not crack again. "It's true. Miss Okafor has held a 30% controlling stake in the Foundation's primary operating entity since December 2019. I prepared the agreement myself. I have the originals." Someone, near the back of the room, said, audibly, "Oh my God." Mireille climbed the dais steps. She did not take the microphone from Desmond. She did not need it. The room had already leaned all the way in. She looked at Philip, then Renée, then Brixton, then Tatiana, then the room. Her voice did not rise. "I came tonight as a guest," she said. "I was told I didn't belong." She paused. "So I came back as the investor." Desmond opened the portfolio on the podium. He laid out the documents the way you lay out evidence when you want the record to be absolutely clean. The 2019 funding agreement, the wire transfer confirmation, $63 million, one sender, one date, the operating entity ownership chart, and at the top, the single page that mattered most, the covenant. He clipped each document to the podium facing outward, toward the press cameras. He clipped the covenant last. He read the relevant language aloud. "In the event that any Caldwell Foundation officer materially misrepresents the origin of the Foundation's capital in a public forum, the co-investors retain the right to dissolve the operating agreement and withdraw all capital contributions without penalty." He closed the portfolio. "As of 9:52 this evening," Desmond said, "the co-investor board has voted to invoke that clause. Effective immediately." Philip Caldwell had not moved. His mouth was slightly open. His hand was still resting on the podium, where the microphone had been. Renée's free hand had risen slowly to her throat, where a necklace of freshwater pearls caught the light. Her fingers closed around it. The string gave. Pearls scattered on the dais floor, small and irretrievable. She did not look down. Brixton's live stream showed his own face for 3 seconds, which later became the most screenshotted moment of the night. His expression was the expression of a person who has been explaining to a room that the bridge is perfectly safe at the exact moment the bridge goes down. His viewer count read 260,000. He tried to say something. The words started and stopped. Tatiana began to cry. Her makeup, which had been applied by a professional that afternoon, was not rated for this. Philip found the angle because Philip always found the angle. He stepped down from the dais. He extended his hand toward Mireille, palm open, the handshake of a man who had been photographed shaking hands since he was 11 years old. "Mireille, Miss Okafor, I want to be very clear. There's been a significant misunderstanding tonight." She looked through his hand. "There was," she said. "It was yours." Desmond lifted the resolution page and read it flat and clean, without drama the way verdicts are supposed to be read. By unanimous vote, Philip Caldwell, removed as Foundation Chair and Executive Director. Brixton Caldwell, removed as VP of Donor Partnerships, all equity interest cancelled. Renée Caldwell, removed as Foundation Co-Chair, all signing authority revoked. Tatiana Rose Public Ambassador contract with the Foundation, voided as of tonight. 4 people. 1 sentence. The room did not make a sound. Brixton recovered first, or tried to. He turned toward Mireille with the particular anger of someone who has never once been in a room that didn't eventually agree with him. "You can't walk in here and—" Oliver was already moving. He placed himself between Brixton and the dais, with the body language of someone who has made a personal decision about which side of this night he intends to be on. "Sir," Oliver said, voice completely flat, "I need you to step back." Brixton had never once in his life been told to step back by someone he employed. He opened his mouth. Nothing that came out was useful. The same security staff who had walked Mireille to the curb 19 minutes ago now formed a quiet perimeter around the Caldwells. Oliver's voice was the same in both directions. "Senator, Mrs. Caldwell, Mr. Caldwell, Miss Rowe, please come with us." Philip walked toward the lobby with his chin still up, which was muscle memory. His hand still twitched at his side where the microphone had been. Renée followed. Brixton followed. Tatiana did not walk so much as be moved. In the lobby, 2 Austin police officers were waiting. One of them was holding a small notebook. He had arrived after a day's call from the curb. "Miss Rowe," the officer said, in the tone of someone who has done this before and will do it again. "You are being cited for misdemeanor assault. We have 3 camera angles, including a live stream with 260,000 current viewers." Tatiana said, "Do you know who I am?" The officer said, "Yes, ma'am." He wrote her name in his notebook, same name she'd said. The Austin Chronicle photographer, who had been waiting outside for a city council member, was now on the curb, photographing something considerably more significant. The Caldwells, exiting the Gala, they had built their entire public identity around. Through the same doors Mireille Okafor had been walked out of 19 minutes earlier. The Texas Monthly reporter, inside, was already filing. Mireille stood at the base of the dais. Her dress was still wet. Her grandmother's earrings were still on. She had not raised her voice once. The string quartet did not know what to play. They played nothing. The headline ran in the Austin American-Statesman the following morning. Front page, above the fold, "The investor they walked out. How the Caldwell Foundation lost everything in one evening." Byline, "Renata Flores, 4,000 words, 7 photographs." The lead image was a still from Brixton's own livestream. Mireille's face, composed, the torn invitation in her left hand, the wet silk across her shoulder, 4 Caldwell mouths open behind her. By 10 in the morning, the article had been read 2 million times. By Thursday, 11 million. Notagest trended on 3 platforms simultaneously. By Friday it had branched. Cher wrote to check, and Tatiana's ears, which referred to Tatiana's mascara, which had been a luxury brand and had performed poorly under pressure. Mireille did not give interviews. Desmond declined every call in under 60 seconds. Her office, the one with the broken sign in East Austin, released a single statement through Park Okafor Legal. The Caldwell Foundation would continue operating under interim leadership pending he full-board restructuring. She was back at her desk by 8 Monday morning. She made her own coffee. She read 2 quarterly reports before 9. Within 48 hours, Whitmore Philanthropic Partners, a Dallas-based endowment management firm, had suspended its contract with the Caldwell Foundation, pending an independent ethics review. 2 federal grants, totaling $9 million, were paused by the Department of Labor, pending disclosure compliance. The Built from Nothing documentary production was halted by the production company, which issued a statement using the word recalibration 4 times in 2 paragraphs. Brixton's donor partnership division, which had been 3 months from a public launch and a press tour, was quietly dissolved. Tiana's public ambassador contract had been with a sustainable fashion label that had been considering her for a campaign. That consideration ended the same night. The label sent a 1-line note through her publicist. The publicist forwarded it. Tatiana read it in the back of a car on her way to the arraignment. Renée Caldwell was photographed at a CVS in the Westlake Hills neighborhood on Tuesday afternoon, buying eye cream. She had driven herself. The Chronicle ran the photo. It was not unkind, technically. It was the caption that was hard. Philip Caldwell appeared before a Sensed Ethics subcommittee 6 weeks later. He pleaded contest to 3 counts of material misrepresentation in public filings. His attorney negotiated. The negotiation took longer than expected because Philip kept trying to tell the garage story, and the subcommittee chair kept gently, and then, less gently redirecting him. His ring finger twitched against the table for 90 minutes. The transcriptionist noted it. Brixton's livestream, the entire 90 minutes of it, was submitted as Exhibit A in a civil suit filed by 14 former Foundation grant recipients who had been passed over in favor of personal connections. The suit listed the livestream in its complaint as self-generated documentary evidence. Brixton's attorney objected to the characterization. The judge overruled the objection. Wallace Greer, who had stood at the bar with a still bourbon for 11 seconds before deciding not to walk toward her, gave a full voluntary deposition. He brought both copies of the covenant. He had kept one at home and one in his office for 5 years, in separate fireproof containers, the way you keep something you know you will eventually need to use. He apologized to Mireille in person, in her office, on a Wednesday morning in January. He sat across from her at the same table where she read her quarterly reports, and said he should have walked toward her the moment he saw her. She thanked him. She did not tell him it was fine, because it had not been fine. She told him that what he did next was what she would remember. He had already resigned from the Foundation. He had already given the deposition. He was already on record. Oliver, the event security director, submitted his own written account the same week, unsolicited. He wrote 4 pages. The last paragraph was a sentence and a half. I had enough information that night to have acted differently. I did not. I am trying to be a person who does not make that choice again. Mireille kept the letter. In February, the Caldwell Foundation was formally reorganized. The Okafor Caldwell Foundation for Emerging Founders held its first public announcement on a Tuesday at noon. New Executive Director, Dr. Soren Williams, 41, Dartmouth. Decade of work in community finance. Former portfolio lead at 3 impact funds. The youngest director the foundation had ever had. The press release was 6 sentences. It moved traffic to the foundation's website by 800%. Oliver joined the Okafor Capital Security team in March. He gave one interview. He said one thing: I opened the wrong door the first time. I'm trying to make sure I open the right ones from here. The clip ran every hour for 2 days. In April, a dazed Tremblay, who had opened the trunk and called Desmond and stayed in the parking lot for the entire 2 hours and 20 minutes without being asked to, was promoted to Chief Operating Officer at Okafor Capital. Mireille sent her the offer letter by hand. No email, paper, envelope, delivered in person on a Friday afternoon. In May, the foundation held its first annual gala under new leadership. Same Hartwell Grand Ballroom. Same floating LED ceiling. Same covered entrance on 5th Street. Almost everything else was different. The guest list had been rebuilt from the ground up. 340 names. 200 of them new to the foundation. The founder of a Houston-based infrastructure fund. 8 scholarship recipients from Texas Southern and UT El Paso. 41 entrepreneurs who had been passed over by the old board and were now writing checks from the new one. Mireille arrived at 7, through the same front doors. Marcus, the valet, was working the same post. He recognized her immediately. He opened the car door. He said, "Welcome back, Miss Okafor." And his voice caught slightly on the last syllable, the way voices catch when a person understands the weight of what they are witnessing. She thanked him by name. She wore a deep navy dress, different from the green. Her grandmother's earrings were on. The string quartet was playing something newer, something that had not existed the last time she had stood in this room. Dr. Williams met her at the entrance. The Texas Monthly reporter, Renata Flores, now of The Atlantic, was already at her table. She did not take notes during the walk. She watched. Somewhere in Texas, at the same hour, the Caldwells were elsewhere. Philip was in a deposition room in Washington, his 22nd of the year. His ring finger had stopped twitching in March. He had started, his attorney noted, gripping the edge of the table instead. But the transcriptionist had not flagged it, and no one had asked. Renée was in a smaller house in Tarrytown, on a street whose neighbors did not know her name yet. She was deciding whether to answer a call from a journalist. She did not answer it. She set the phone face down and looked at the wall. Brixton was in a courtroom in Austin, listening to his own words being read back to him by someone whose job it was to make sure every person in the room understood them. Tatiana was completing her 4th week of community service at a food bank in the Mueller neighborhood. She had stopped expecting anyone to recognize her. Someone had, twice. She had not known what to do with it. Inside the Hartwell, Mireille took the stage. She did not take the microphone from its stand. The room had already gone completely quiet. She did not read from notes. She did not thank donors in order of gift size. She did not mention the Caldwells. She thanked Marcus by name. She thanked Oliver, seated at table 1 in a blazer with the foundation's new mark on the chest pocket. She thanked Adese. She thanked Desmond. She thanked Wallace Greer, who was seated at table 1 also, and who looked at the floor for 3 full seconds before he looked back up. She thanked the valet who had called her ma'am and meant it. Each of them stood when she said their name. Then she announced it. The Okafor Emerging Founders Fund. $40 million over 8 years. Full funding plus 2 years of operational support for first-generation entrepreneurs who had been declined by at least 2 traditional funding institutions. 150 recipients per year. Applications opened at midnight. The room rose. Not on cue, not all at once. One chair, then another, then a wave. The way things rise when they are ready. When it settled, Mireille reached into her bag. The same bag from November. The strap had been re-stitched. She took out the 2 halves of the torn invitation that she had caught against her chest 6 months ago and never thrown away. She set them on the edge of the podium in the light. "They tore this," she said, "because they thought it would send me away." She paused. Every person in this room has been handed something that someone else decided wasn't valid. I want you to keep those things. The room did not breathe because the people who tore them were wrong about you. And tonight, you're writing the checks. If you walked into a room tonight and someone decided before you opened your mouth that you didn't belong, drop it in the comments. Like and share this, and subscribe to Brave Tales. We're just getting started.